Hey BookTube, it's Sarah and welcome back to my channel, The Book Bag. Today I'm going to be talking about 3 advanced reader's copies that I received for work. They're all books that come out at the end of September, and I thought I would just share my thoughts with you guys, because I have many of them. So I think I'm going to talk about the books from my least favorite to my top pick. So we're going to start with Dark Rise by C.S. Pacat. So this is actually they're all fantasy sci-fi books, but this is a fantasy book. Synopsis is basically like, there was magic in the world. It has vanished now, light won over dark, but dark forces are rising, and the stewards, who are like the keepers of the light, are preparing for another epic battle between light and dark. So it's pretty like bare bones. You got light and dark, literally, they're just called light and dark, fighting each other. This wasn't like a bad book by any means, it just wasn't really my kind of book. It had a really like Knights of the Templar kind of feeling to it. Lots of almost like monastic practices going on with the stewards. There's all sorts of like relics and rituals and stuff. But they're also obviously guardians and like fighters. But yeah, so like it follows our main character Will, who I think is this guy here, who is supposed to be like the reborn chosen one kind of thing for the light side, as he finds this out and ends up like joining up with the stewards to fight the dark forces. It was, I don't know, it was kind of basic. I found Will to be like an okay main character, but he wasn't super interesting. There was like a secondary character, Violet, who was much more interesting to me, and I kind of wish she had been our chosen one, but instead we got kind of plain white boy Will, Wonder Bread child, but it's fun. I found the development of the magic system in this book kind of slow. Like, it took me a long time to really realize or figure out what was going on exactly, which might be some people's kind of fantasy, but I have a hard time with like really high fantasy stuff, and I like it when they explain the world a little bit quicker and I can pick up on it a little bit better, because I think I spent, I don't know, maybe like a third of this book being like, what's going on? How do they do these things? What's happening? So that kind of turned me off of the book a little bit. It also felt like a long book, but a short book at the same time. It was like almost 450 pages. And it felt like if they had just added another maybe 50 pages, we could have wrapped up the whole story and there wouldn't need to be sequels, because I think this is the first in it's the first in a trilogy. So there will be 2 more books after this, and I definitely think they could have wrapped the whole thing up in just like another 50 pages. Obviously that's not where it's going. There's going to be a different way that this ends. But I don't know if I will find that out, because I don't think I'm going to continue with this series. I think I gave this like 3 stars on Goodreads, where it's like I didn't hate reading it. I was just kind of like having a hard time caring a whole lot about the characters and about their mission. There were some good like twists throughout it that I enjoyed. But yeah, it didn't really scratch my fantasy itch. And it also didn't really have much of a moral to it. Like there's a bit of, like you can fight your destiny, you don't have to be what you were born to be. But that was the only real moral for it, and in comparison to the other 2 books I'm going to talk about, it just didn't really cut it for me. Next book I got was Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. This I got as like a full-on manuscript, so like that was pretty fun. I got to write in it, because I don't really like writing in my books. Scratch that. I do not like writing in my books at all, but because this was a manuscript, I could kind of add little notes in there and I didn't feel guilty about it. So this was a very fun reading experience. And this one follows our 2 main characters. One of them is like an indentured servant at this night zoo. The second one is a soldier who's about to become a warrior. He's going through this ritual to join this like elite set of warriors for the village, when they kind of run into each other and this monster that lives in the jungle called the Shaitani. And so they end up ganging up together to fight the Shaitani and save their respective families and friends from the reign of this terrifying monster. So this one had a lot of I think it was Swahili influences in it. Had a lot of like, it drew a lot of its content from various African mythology, which is really neat. It was very atmospheric, like had good jungle vibes. But the characters I found were a little bit flat. They didn't really jump off the page in the way that I wanted them to. It did have a dual or triple perspective. There were like the two main characters had their perspectives, and then there was a third perspective of another character in the past, which came up every now and then. And I thought the two main characters, their perspectives worked really well with each other, but then I didn't feel like that third perspective was utilized as well as it could have been. So I found a lot of the plot twists that happened, like concerning that third perspective, showed up in the two main characters' perspectives way before it was even really alluded to in the third character's perspective. So it just kind of lost its steam, didn't keep up with the pace of the narrative from the other two perspectives, and then felt a little unnecessary near the end. It didn't really add anything because you're like, oh, I can see that this is what's going to happen. And then like 3 chapters later, they're like, yeah, you're right. That is what happened. And I was like, cool. Great. There were quite a few like twists and turns throughout the story, especially in the last, I would say like a quarter to a third of the book, some of which I definitely guessed and some of which I didn't. So that was kind of nice because I got the little like victory fist pump of like, yeah, I'm smart, I figured it out, but then also got to be surprised as well. I didn't just be like, oh, well, I saw that coming. So that was nice. I think I will read the sequel to this series because it did leave off on a bit of a cliffhanger. So I think I'm more interested in seeing what happens to these characters than I am with the other book. But once again, I think I gave this one, I think this one was the 4 stars on Goodreads, probably like 3.5. So like not terrible or anything, but it didn't feel as like new as I wanted it to. Dark Rise was definitely the most kind of derivative, referential, like it felt like a lot of different things I'd read before. Like I'd read a passage and be like, oh, that's Lord of the Rings, or like, oh, this like kid feels a lot like a Harry Potter kind of chosen one without having as much personality as Harry Potter. And then this one felt a little like almost like I had read parts of it before, even though I hadn't. But yeah, Beasts of Prey reminded me a little bit of like Children of Blood and Bone, had those kind of similar vibes, but it was still good. It just wasn't as new and exciting as the third one. So the third book that I read was Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. So this is a Canadian author, which is super exciting. We love Canadian authors. And they describe this one as a Pacific Rim meets The Handmaid's Tale, blended with like Chinese history and like mecha sci-fi. So this was like nothing I'd ever read before. This was really cool. I did think that the Pacific Rim comparison was spot on. They pilot these big like robot machines that they've made to fight these other machines that are on the planet. And the way it works is there's usually a male pilot, and then he has his female concubines who he kind of uses their life force to pilot the thing, and they always die at the end of it. There's a lot of Chinese history in here as well. They talk about like foot binding, and the main character is actually based off of the first female emperor from China, so that was really neat. It is set in the future, but it takes a lot of Chinese history and like patriarchal nonsense and applies it to this future society, so that was really cool. There's also like some cool queer representation in here, and it's just unlike anything I've ever read before. It was super feminist, it was super brutal. Our main character was trying to get revenge. Her sister was one of the concubines who was killed in one of these suits, so she is determined to join the system as well and just kill the pilot who killed her sister. And that's all she's gonna do. She does not care if she dies, she doesn't care who else she hurts. She's gonna kill that pilot if it's the last thing she does. And that kind of like nothing left to lose mentality was absolutely fascinating because you never knew what she was going to do next. She was just, you know, she had her one goal, she was bloodthirsty, she was out for revenge, she was going to do it, and then after that, if she gets there, amazing. Who knows what she'll do next. If she doesn't get there, then she's not going to be happy. But it was just really cool to see a female main character who was so like bloodthirsty and brutal and absolutely unapologetic about it. So that was great. I think I gave this one 4.5 stars on Goodreads. It's excellent. I highly recommend you check it out. This one is also going to be a series, and I am definitely going to be checking out the sequels to this one because it also left off on a cliffhanger, and I am dying to know what happens next. So read this one. It's good and it's beautiful. Look at that cover. This is my favorite cover out of all of them too. Those are the 3 advanced readers copies that I got for my work. I hope you enjoyed these little mini reviews, and let me know if you end up picking up any of them or like requesting their arcs on NetGalley. I think they're probably still available. But yeah, I hope you guys pick them up when they come out. They're all really great, especially Iron Widow. Read Iron Widow. I also forgot to mention their publishing dates, but Iron Widow comes out September 21st, Dark Rise comes out September 28th, and Beasts of Prey also comes out September 28th. So make sure you go to your local bookstore and pick them up. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. It just didn't really scratch my fantasy-ish.